One farmer says, "Seems to me there was a tea party in Boston that was illegal too."
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold.
We shall seek to establish and maintain a dollar which will not change its purchasing and debt-paying power during the succeeding generation.
As anguished shrieks rose up from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.
Government credit and government currency are really one and the same thing. A reserve of gold and a small reserve of silver.
Why do central banks hold it?
Well, it's a form of reserves.
Why don't they hold diamonds?
Well, it's tradition, long-term tradition.
Welcome back to the JUNIUS MALTBY channel. Let's take a quick run through the news this evening. Many of you will wake up tomorrow morning and be able to catch it then. This week's been quite interesting. We saw metal prices hit levels that we'd only talked about a year or so ago, going in the opposite direction that the naysayers have predicted. It was incredible to see silver breach that psychological $18 mark. At this point, who knows where it's going to go. I think silver, we're going to see it in the 20s at some point within the next year or so, especially if the economy goes in the direction that we're seeing it going. You look at these headlines, top news, why record low bond yields could keep heading lower as market fears, and then in quotations, disaster scenario. Bond yields around the world careened to new lows as investors worried about recession, the lack of progress in trade talks between the U.S. and China, and the latest developments in the U.K. around Brexit. Strategists expect yields to continue to move lower as summer ends and the September calendar opens up to a rush of economic reports and key central bank meetings later in the month. The disaster scenario is if yields fall dramatically from here, said one strategist. Hypothetically, if the trade situation intensifies, if maybe Hong Kong goes badly and Brexit seems like it results in a hard exit, then what you probably get is a massive rally again in treasuries. Bond yields are heading south, and there appears to be no stopping them for now. Again, this article is from CNBC, so take it with a grain of salt, as usual. The benchmark 10-year Treasury note yield, which influences everything from business loans to home mortgages, has been hugging 3-year lows and was at 1.45% Wednesday. That's below the 2-year yield of 1.5%, and the move has been signaling recession. The 30-year Treasury bond fell to an all-time low of 1.91% Wednesday as yields around the world, which move opposite price, slid to multi-year or record lows. U.S. rates followed a global move lower, with the Japanese 10-year yield falling to a new negative 3-year low and the German 10-year Bund yield sliding to its own record minus 0.72%. Enough talk of the paper trash. Let's take a look at silver. Silver up 0.032 cents, 3 cents. That's today so far when I was checking CNBC. But we're sitting at $18.35. And then look at that 1-month chart. We looked at these in the last video where we did some news discussion. However, silver is, the articles are talking about riding on gold's coattails. I think silver is finally having its breakout moment that we've been waiting for, that many of you have been holding on to, and hopefully you kept your stacks heavy, you kept adding, knowing that this day would likely come. King Gold up $1.60, sitting at $1,550.70. That's a 1-month chart. Gold exploding from $14.25 to $15.50. Absolutely incredible. We're looking at a $125 rise in just that short span of time. Again, you have to consider the words we were having to deal with and wrestle, the dissertations of those individuals that believed gold was only headed in one direction, and that was back to below $700. It has not yet happened. It will not happen. I've stood by that. You've heard me. I've banked on it with my reputation here on this channel. I've never been 100% accurate or right. However, I've always believed that gold would stay above that 1100 mark, specifically due to the amount of central banks that put into it back during the last economic crisis, when they were making large tonnage purchases at the $1,000 and $1,100 and $1,140 mark. It's not going below that. I mean, you look at the amount of nations that have recalled their gold from vault storage to bring it back and put it into domestic banks. Gold's sitting where it is, and this is low. These are low numbers. Again, gold should be valued. Well, some people believe 5,000. You'll hear people talk about 10,000. But it's definitely worth far more than it is right now. And I believe the world at some point will awaken to that. Now, this is a chart looking back on 5 years of gold. Now, over the course of that time, here on the channel, we've had a lot of discussions. There's been a lot of videos, a lot of comments, a lot of debate, a lot of articles reviewed regarding gold, where it's going, where it's been, where it could possibly end up, all of these things. And you can see the fluctuations there. Now look at that back in 2016, when it just dipped there right below 1100, just briefly, and then went right back up to 1300. Fluctuated around there, dipping below 1200, back to 1300, back to 1200, back to 1300. And then here we see it this year taking off and surpassing the 1500 mark for the first time in quite a while. That says something. Those of you holding gold, holding metals, have been vindicated, in my opinion, and will continue to be. The economy is not showing any signs of improvement. We've seen the discussions regarding bailout bubbles, how all of the quantitative easing, all of the currency, the money supply that was released and pumped into the marketplace of the world economy to stave off the consequences of the very behavior they perform that caused the situation we entered into. Easy credit, expansion of the money supply, all of that. Not only is that continuing to happen, but they don't have the fail-safes anymore. They don't have the measures, the countermeasures at their disposal. They've exhausted all efforts, all of their Keynesian ways, and here we see us on the precipice, on the brink of what could be a very serious economic situation for the entire world. It's being talked about on all of the outlets, and we're seeing metals perform as if they're the canary in the coal mine. They're pointing in the direction of things that are possibly to come. Now, we could be wrong. We thought the last economic contraction was really it. A lot of us thought that the world economy was going to be at a point of no return. And you could almost say in a way it was. Professor Antal Fouquet, if you remember, said we had entered a sea change. There was no real way to predict where we were going at that point because the world economy had entered uncharted waters and no one had ever been there before. So there was no really way to determine the direction of things at the time during the last major crisis. However, here on the most boring channel on YouTube, we kept our finger on the pulse. We held strong. We remained steadfast in knowing that gold was not going to go in that bearish direction. It would not return to 700 or 800. And those who placed bets on those positions, I don't know anyone who has. However, those who shorted gold in that way, well, they're having to eat it now. Definitely having to eat it. And I would love to hear from the individuals out there that were talking about gold dipping to the $700 and $800 range. And I don't have time to go back to those gold videos we made 2015 or 16, even 2014, where a lot of the comments that came in from the passersby, the individuals that would just click on a gold video just to leave a bearish comment or mock those in the gold community. It would be nice to go back and read some of those comments where they were predicting $700, $800 gold, or even lower. I remember even seeing predictions of $500, $300. There were even articles out there, mainstream articles, talking about gold hitting those low levels. Well, it's not the case. And as soon as we see 1600, 1700, 1800, and eventually I do believe we will see it breach the 2000 mark. And that's going to be interesting psychologically. When gold surpasses 2000, and of course it will likely retreat below that temporarily, but when it finally breaches levels in the 2000s and fails to return below that level, I think you'll see a lot of news generated regarding gold and many opinions change regarding its true value. There is a bit of good news we'll report just quickly. One thing that economic contractions bring about is the purge of useless things and useless businesses. And we see here that Forever 21 is weighing a bankruptcy filing. So let's get rid of it. I've only walked by the front of these stores, but if you look into it a little further, you'll realize it's just a useless chain for millennials and people who think they're Forever 21, I guess, and never grew up and like to wear these trendy inner city or urban fashions. And taking a look at the horse that just refuses to finally die, the Venezuelan situation. You know, they turn to US dollars and gold. It's funny, they're turning to gold as the value of the bolivars continues to drop. There was just an article recently put out. I didn't pull it into here. However, it was a mainstream, typical, opinion piece, hit piece, saying that gold serves no purpose and will not help you during hyperinflation. I didn't even put the article up. I'm not going to give them any credit. I'm not even going to go back and find the headline. I'm not even going to read it to you or look at it. It's the ramblings of madmen. It's just, you would never be walking down the street and stop and take the opinion seriously of a transient sleeping in a cardboard box who's spent the last 30 years dropping acid and drinking malt liquor. His opinion is, well, quite frankly, it's invalid. It doesn't have any basis, and he's hallucinating. That is what the opinion is of those saying that gold does not help you during a hyperinflationary event. It's just not the case. It always has. Every time there's ever been one in history, it has been the anchor for those who held it, and they were able to preserve dynastic wealth and preserve the wealth of their families moving forward. And then I guess there's a video, if you go look at this, Professor Steve Hanke talking about hyperinflation, citizens throwing out worthless bolivars, and there's a video of the sanitation department, the garbage men, taking bags full of this paper currency, these bolivars, and just throwing them into garbage trucks. That is where paper currency ends up. That's where it comes to rest. Government promissory notes. There is no difference between those notes being stuffed into the back of a garbage truck right now in Venezuela than the green, useless fiat paper, the Federal Reserve notes here in the United States, or for that matter, the Euro notes there in the European Union. And remember, we brought it up several years ago, for those of you in the Euro, the Zimbabwe note, the $100 trillion note, the largest hyperinflationary note ever printed in history. It was printed on the exact same paper, in the same printing, on the same printing presses, in the same printing houses as the Euro. Just goes to show there's really no difference. The images vary, and the governments and institutions that issue them vary. However, it's the same thing. It's worthless, useless, unbacked fiat trash. And eventually, again, all fiat returns to its intrinsic value eventually, and that is zero. It's just a matter of time. That is going to wrap up this evening's conversation. 15 minutes of boredom you'll never get back. Thank you all for stopping by the JUNIUS Maltby channel. We will be working on getting more videos out. I apologize for being somewhat fatigued this evening as I was out in the sun all day doing gardening. And all of you here on the channel know that I love gardening. I love doing work in the yard. And I've been doing quite a bit of that recently, putting some trees and such in. And that's been something I know a lot of you have been interested in discussing and hearing about. It's always fun to venture off the map here and stray away from the noise of the news cycle, the mainstream media, and global events. It's a ship that we can't really steer. However, we can prepare for the seas ahead as passengers on this ship of insanity. Alright, thanks for being here. As always, drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe. If you want to support this channel, the JUNIUS Maltby channel, the project, what we do here as we go forward, feel free to do so. There are opportunities for that. Appreciate each and every one of you, the steadfast subscribers and followers and viewers here of the JUNIUS Maltby channel.